Oh, hello, yeah. Well, that turned out wet and windy, didn't it? I know someone who's staying in a caravan for the weekend. I'm not entirely convinced, well, that's going to be a good idea. Anyway, perhaps leaning into maybe a bit of pathetic fallacy, or certainly some fallacies and a lot of pathetic stuff. The fallout from the Manchester synagogue killings, not the least of which is now appearing that the police appears to have shot some people, which is going to lead to some, well, not particularly awkward questions. Hopefully nobody will last too many of them. But is that commentariat? Because yesterday we had wall-to-wall stuff from all the usual voices on the right. It was definitely Christmas time at Talk TV. They were really heavily into it. And, the Daily Telegraph had the usual people they employed to tell us how bad Palestinians are, and the usual people across the rest of the media to tell us how bad Keir Starmer was, because he's definitely very, very bad. Because whenever, he wants to describe a battle that he might have on his hand or a fight that we need to have, well, it just encourages people who may or may not have been born in this country to go into synagogues and kill people. Or something. Not entirely sure, because the problem I have with all of this stuff is about the inherent logic of it. Because if that's the case and the inherent logic of that, then where do we arrive at with Lucy Connolly, or indeed with Nigel Farage, Richard Tyson, all the rest of them reform, or indeed going out to your Rupert Lowe's in terms of the language that they use? Well, apparently they're just perfectly reasonable people, and we shouldn't really question things. Or when I say we shouldn't, I mean, well, I shouldn't, ideally. Which leads us on to the whole thing about our right-wing commentariat, because I am always struck by the discrepancy between how they see themselves, which is as a kind of fearless Smith against Big Brother, cowering round the side of the telly screen so that they can write their diary. Whereas, of course, they're just not, are they? Because they are certainly members of the lower party, and the lower party as such demands that they don't ever question anything, certainly not out loud. You're allowed to have those thoughts, but by God, your editor will not allow you to put them into print. So where are these dissenting voices? I never see them. I mean, we can argue about people on the left, and, left-wing journalists, a lot of them do actually get very often into a lot of trouble one way or another, being kicked out of conferences. Doesn't tend to happen to the right. Actually being beaten up every once in a while. Doesn't really happen to other people, yeah? The crews at GB News work in London and will always tell us about how dangerous it is to be in London, and yet never seem to have anything happen to them. The worst thing I can make out with Darren Grimes, for example, apart from the fact that he's Darren Grimes, which perhaps is a form of punishment in itself, was that one time somebody recognised him on the street and shouted at him. As far as I'm aware, that's the limit to it, which of course he managed to make hay with for about 2 days, because it's appalling behaviour, because the guy wasn't as white as Darren is. Goes to prove everything that you want, doesn't it? But where exactly are they, these fearless, independent voices? Nowhere. Richard Littlejohn, nowhere to be seen. Julia Hartley-Brewer, really in favour of free speech. Well, OK, let's talk about free speech. Precisely, let's talk about what's going on in the States with Donald Trump, whereby all of those people on the left from, let's say, a year and a half or so ago that were warning that this type of thing was going to happen are now proved right. So where are all the people, for example, in the British media that are saying, oh my God, have you seen what's happening in the States? It's appalling. Nowhere. You get articles in the Daily Express to which suggests that, well, living as I do in an authoritarian Singapore, I think British state could learn something about us. After all, there's very little crime out here. Yeah, I'm sure there is. I'm sure there's very little crime in various places. Probably very little crime in Saudi Arabia. Not really a beacon of democracy in Three-Fort, is it? Still, unless you're a very highly paid comedian, but that's a completely different story. The only times that these people appear to have an original, or allow themselves to have an original thought, or indeed just emote slightly, is whenever they're hit at the bottom dollar. Those people that got laid off from GB News because they finally went too far, your Loza Foxes and the rest of them, always manage to come out and complain bitterly about the appalling system that kept them muzzled beforehand, but never during. These people run no risk to themselves that they'll ever not be able to pay the mortgage, whilst at the same time telling us that we mustn't accept the authority of this current government because, well, I don't know, they're just bad people. We must think for ourselves. We must be free thinkers. But they just aren't at all, ever. Anyway, I don't know, folks. What do you think? I just find this stuff astounding. I've spent, I don't know, last 5 years looking at social media, and the one thing that the right wingers will always do is insist that there's this broad viewpoint that they have, but there isn't any, is there? Yeah, Palestine action are bad. Jewish people feel threatened. Need to ban Palestine action. Anyone that doesn't agree with us is just a friend of the terrorists. Oh, okay then. Sounds like the IRA in the 70s. Maybe the IRA in the 70s had a point. Maybe. But of course, then you're just encouraging them, aren't you? We must let those hunger strikers die. We mustn't give in, because otherwise, in that case, well, God, we'd end up with a Good Friday Agreement and peace. We could never have that, could we? Do have a lovely day. Do stay warm and dry. Good grief. Wind. Oh,